Hi, this video is going to serve as something of a follow-up to my last one, which provoked a bit of animosity, let's say. And that's fine, it's kind of what I expected. Excuse me. Now, originally I was just going to respond to each individual comment, but I've noticed there's been quite a few since I last checked, so it's just going to take too long to respond to each individual one. And the basic traction is similar, so I'm going to broadly respond to the allegations made against me, or the narrative that's being spun against me on that thread. Firstly, something needs to be made clear. My channel is not a news source, and I've never claimed it is. I've never presented this channel as some sort of little independent network or something. It's simply a guy voicing his opinions on things. That's what I do. That's what I've always done. And where possible, I do put sources to what I'm talking about. I.e., if I am reading from a report or I'm referring to something, I'll try and put a link to that. And I've done that with the Tucker Carlson video. So those saying that, provide your sources, this thing about sources I'll come back to. But I saw the Tucker Carlson thing from the Daily Telegraph, and I put it there. So the link is there. There's a few points I want to address, and honestly, most of the feedback that I was getting was from anonymous accounts. What I mean by that is people who have no profile picture, no content. And it looks very much like people who have set up accounts either specifically to attack me, or they're bots, Russian bots. It's well known that Russia does this. They get English language internet users to troll people with pro-Kremlin propaganda. And the ones that aren't, the ones that have kind of normal names and Western-sounding names, even there's very little content. So for those of you saying that, challenging me and putting out these propositions to me and then saying you'll get back to me, understand something clearly. I don't owe anything to any of you guys, okay? I've kept the comment section open, which actually I don't really have to do. There are plenty of videos, plenty of channels out there that block the comments. I've never done that, or I've very, very rarely done that. So, the very few occasions I have were situations where it got quite ugly, and there was actually one situation, it was a matter of security for one of my subscribers, and that's a whole other story. But the point is, the vast majority of my videos, I leave the comment section open, even when it's viewpoints I find repugnant, as I do with Putin supporters. Now, whether I'll keep that policy or not is up to me, quite frankly. It's my channel. I'm well aware, though, that, if I block comments, then I'll be accused of hypocrisy. Except I don't poison anyone. I don't throw, my critics in prison. I don't. And I'm an individual. I'm not a democracy. I'm not a nation state. So whether I go down that line or not, I don't know. But for now, I won't. I mean, it's useful to see the sort of mindset that is out there. I have to say the overall responses on my channel are positive, probably 70% to 30%. So occasionally I make a video that provokes people, and it comes with the territory, so be it. There's two things I want to do here. Firstly, address directly this point about sources, because a number of people responded to that video and said I had no facts. It was full of, basically that was subtraction. They were different. Like I said, some of these sources were trolling, but I did state several facts. Russia invaded Ukraine. That is a fact. I pointed out that Tucker Carlson is lying when he says that Putin has never had a voice in the West. That is an empirical reality. Why? Because Putin has been interviewed by Western journalists. So when Carlson claims that he's never had a voice, it's simply not true. Before I get into the issue of sources, I have some challenges for Tucker Carlson. I don't know when this interview is supposed to be taking place. And by the way, I did say in the video that I hadn't watched it. It hasn't happened yet. I was very upfront about that. I haven't said anything to the contrary. But it is my firm conviction that he will not give an objective interview. And how am I basing that? I'm basing it on Tucker Carlson's positions over the years. He has consistently taken pro-Russia, anti-Ukraine positions. So it really isn't rocket science to conjecture that that is going to be someone who's pushing an agenda. I mean, really, you can play with semantics with this, but Tucker Carlson's record speaks for itself. Now, my challenge for Tucker Carlson, he says that he's not going to try and influence viewers to agree with Putin. What I'd like to know is what questions is he going to ask? And if this is really going to be an objective interview, is he going to ask Putin about the thousands of Ukrainian children kidnapped and sent to Russia? Is he going to ask Putin about the fate of journalists in Russia? Quite a few who have ended up dead. One example is Anna Politkovskaya. I have her book. She was murdered in the late 2000s. And, you know, often, as is the case in Russia, it's difficult to draw a direct line to Putin. But the simple reality is there have been so many critics of this tyrant, this dictator, who've either ended up dead or in prison. That's a fact. Now, is he going to ask those questions? Is he going to raise issues about press freedom in Russia? Because he's talking about being an objective journalist. He's talking about the American people have a right to know the truth. Well, do they have a right to hear from Russia's opposition? Do they have a right to hear from Alexei Navalny? Oh, wait, they can't, because he's languishing in a prison in the Arctic Circle. This is what I find so sickening about Carlson's position. He is portraying this as just a pitch at objectivity and a pitch of letting people hear the other side. And that would be fine if it actually stacked up to what is going on here. But I believe he is going in with an agenda. I believe he is a stooge of Putin. I believe he is a pro-Kremlin propagandist. That's my firm conviction. Okay? I'm not saying that to be a fact. I'm saying that's my opinion. And I'm entitled to my opinion. But it's an opinion based on what I've observed of Tucker Carlson over the years, the positions that he's come out with. In fact, in the other video I linked, he said that Russia's doing very well. Now, that in itself is not a statement of any political persuasion necessarily. But, you know, you guys ask about sources. This is an important point. Here's the thing. I can cite any number of sources, but we know it's a game, because if I cite, say, the BBC, CNN, DW News, Euronews, France 24, you name it, pretty much any mainstream Western network, then the retort will be, oh, it's mainstream media, you can't believe it. So what's the point of me citing sources if you guys are just going to throw it back in my face anyway? I mean, by the way, I did watch RT when it was out. It made me sick. I thought it was, you know, it was what it was. It was a network that was set up by Russian ultranationalists to promote a ultra-Russian nationalist agenda. Margarita Simonian, I think, is despicable. I mean, this is a woman who talks about the Russian truth of things, but the entire pitch of RT was to vilify the West and to stoke up divisions in the West, whilst portraying glorious Mother Russia in a positive light. It was, I mean, how anyone could think that was in any way objective. And here's the thing, every news source has a bias, but that's the point. I can cite all these sources. So you know what, I'll cite something a little bit more on the margins. I've got two books here. One is by the late Alexander Litvinenko, co-authored by Yuri Felshtinsky, Blowing Up Russia. And if you look, it's a bit hard to see, but it's banned in Russia. This is typical of a tyranny, banned in Russia. Meanwhile, someone like Tucker Carlson can mouth off anti-West diatribes, you know, come out with his conspiracy theories, come out with pro-Kremlin narratives, and he's free to do that. He lost his position on Fox, but he's not going to be poisoned. He's not going to be thrown in jail. So he's got the freedom to do that. Mafia State by Luke Harding. This is a very interesting read. Now, Luke Harding, former Guardian journalist, actually lived in Russia. He speaks the language, he knows Russia well. He was trailed by the FSB when he was there. This was the late 2000s, before things got really bad. And quite frankly, I put a lot more weight on someone like Luke Harding than I would on a Putin shill like Tucker Carlson. I mean, Carlson's a lot more famous, and he's been successful in commercial sense. But as a journalist, I have zero respect for him. I'm even reluctant to call him that. I think he's a shill for Putin, and he's a shill for Trump while we're at it. But that's, I think there's something very, very, very wrong has happened in the American conservative movement in recent years, for want of a better term. The party of Reagan has now become something very, I don't know really how to describe it best, but it's something very, Trump spoke about cleaning up the swamp. He is the swamp. He absolutely is the swamp. And you get someone like Tucker Carlson, who in the year 2024 is pandering to the Russian tyrant at a time when he continues to brutalize the Ukrainian people. Today, another airstrike with civilian casualties. I have no respect for Western apologists for Putin, no respect whatsoever. And I know the semantic games they play, they talk about sources, but like I say, I can quote all these sources, but it would be a waste of time because they'll just say, it's mainstream media, you can't believe it. So I would retort and say, well, what the hell are your sources? If it's not RT, what is it? Tucker Carlson? I mean, he's already told a lie. He said that Putin has never been given a voice in the West. That is simply not true. Putin has been interviewed by Western journalists. So to say that he's never had a voice is false. One of my critics came up with the grotesque argument that Putin's some sort of peacemaker. After he invaded Ukraine, after the fact, he offered peace talks. How nice of him. That's a bit like saying the burglar went into someone's house and then offered to, make amends by shaking hands, but won't give anything back. It's a sick, sick argument to portray Putin as some sort of peacemaker. I mean, sick. Look at the number of wars Putin's been involved in. The Second Chechen War, Georgia, Ukraine, propping up the Assad dictatorship in Syria. There's something... I cannot even begin to imagine the moral compass of those who defend Putin. I mean, even if you want to argue that this is all about NATO encroachment, which I think is a very flimsy argument when you actually bother to look at a map. But even if you look at what's happening within Russia, I mean, this so-called election that's going to take place next month, it will be a shoe-in for Putin because any significant opposition is in jail, i.e. Alexei Navalny. It's just going to be a shoe-in for the Russian tyrant. This is a tyrant who is now relying on Chechen Islamists to prop up his filthy war in Ukraine. I cannot stomach the hypocrisy of those on the left who talk pacifism whilst turning a blind eye to what Putin's doing, and those on the right who, they're doing what they're doing. They're propping up the Russian tyrant. I can't say that I understand it. I can't believe that the party of Reagan is coming out with this stuff, from the evil empire to let's promote the propaganda of the Russian tyrant. It's something very, very sick has happened in recent years, and I have a big problem with it. But I accept that I'm not going to be popular with a certain contingent of people. Those who support Carlson, those who support Trump, those who support Putin. Fine. I accept that. It comes with the territory. But you ask for sources, I've given them. And you don't accept them. Fine. I don't accept your sources. So that's where we are. I mean, that's the way it is. But I don't blindly believe any source. I question everything. I mean, I've criticised the BBC. I've criticised CNN. I think I've criticised pretty much every network at some point. But there comes a point when, you cannot just dismiss millions of people. I'm talking about the Ukrainians. The victim blaming, to me, is beyond repulsive. The fact that Russia invades a sovereign country and, under the guise of denazification, which is ironic because the Russian neo-Nazi movements and I say movements plural, are very profound. There's an entire chapter in this on that, actually, where you get Russian neo-Nazi youths go around Moscow and St. Petersburg targeting minorities, particularly from Central Asia. At times, the Russian authorities have kind of treated this as hooliganism. At other times, Putin has utilized it. But denazification, they should start in their own backyard. I mean, look at Wagner. It's an absolute neo-Nazi, it was a neo-Nazi group. Look at Putin's Chechen thug, Ramzan Kadyrov. Look at the situation in Chechnya on his watch. Some of the world's worst human rights abuses are under Putin's proxies. So I just feel I want to vomit, quite frankly, when I see people regurgitating the Kremlin's lies. But that's the point I would put. If Carlson asks these questions, if he asks about the fate of journalists who've questioned Putin, if he asks about press freedom in Russia, if he raises those questions, then you know what? I'll say, okay, maybe I misjudged him. Maybe he is doing his job as a journalist. I don't believe it, and I'll hold my breath, because I think that his positions over the years leave reasonable conjecture that he is going to, what we're going to see in this interview is an hour, or whatever it will be, of groveling, of giving Putin nice, comfortable questions. He's going to ask things like, Mr. President, do you think the Western media have been fair with you? This is, it's just going to give Putin what he wants. I do not for a second believe that Carlson is going to ask tough questions. If he does, okay, I'm wrong, but I'll hold my breath on that, because his statements over the years prove otherwise. There are journalists who really do hold power to account, who take risks to expose corruption, organised crime, tyranny. Those are journalists who deserve enormous respect. But lackeys for dictators, I have no respect for them. None. And I think Mr. Carlson falls into that category. A bit like the late John Pilger, although Pilger had more field experience. But this is the sort of journalist I respect. Doesn't have the fame of Tucker Carlson, but a lot more integrity. I'll leave it there, but that's honestly how I feel about it. Now, in going forward, I get it. If I block comments for these Putin fanboys and fangirls, I'll be accused of hypocrisy. I'm really under no obligation to